Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host, and tonight will be a first for the Imaginary Gallery, but what I'll be doing is reading some information I found from an article which I just happened to be browsing the web and found some interesting information that will help, if you haven't read it already, help you understand a little more of what you're dealing with if there's a cluster B in your life. And this article, which I'll leave a link to because I'm not covering the whole thing, but it's called 5 Ways to Shut Down a Narcissist. It's from Forbes magazine, and the author is Steven Berglas. Steven says that playing people is what narcissists do whenever they're not sleeping. They also play entities if they believe doing so will help them accrue money and or power. This next part I'm covering is very interesting and very true about understanding the idealization, and sure, we all know what it is, but this kind of explains it in a different manner, like a viewpoint normally not seen. So he states, here's what the process of idealization leads to devaluation is all about. Because it's very strange, if you've dealt with such a person, to wonder how you can go from 1 minute from being a deity to the next moment trash. So here's an explanation of it. Children see objects and entities in their world as either all good or all bad. Like the stories they love, only heroes and villains inhabit the land in which they live. Their tender young egos cannot make sense of complex characters with various personalities. Integrating good and bad traits within one person overwhelms them. But what do you expect? Adults have trouble with characters like Walt Kowalski, the retired auto worker played by Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. On one hand, he's a loathsome racist. On the other, a sensitive father figure to a young immigrant who lives next door to him. If you found it hard to make sense of Eastwood as Kowalski, how can kids make sense of complex personalities that refuse to identify who they are by wearing either a white or a black hat? Well, they cannot. But fortunately, a child's ego comes equipped with factory-installed defense mechanisms that enable him or her to cope with complex personalities. The process is called splitting. Splitting the world into idealized or devalued objects that gain the child's affection or incur the child's loathing. If daddy is good to the child, he's loved. If daddy yells and scares the child, well, he's hated. Kids don't allow for dad to have a bad day or to get cut by broken glass, he says. Now, normally the need to employ the splitting defense wanes as a child ages. For some, however, it does not, and the child remains a splitter into adulthood. People in this world are put on pedestals one moment and knocked off the next, making intimate emotional relationships a pipe dream. Even non-intimate relationships with narcissists are nightmarish. What constitutes great work on Monday can become unprofessional, inappropriate behavior by Thursday for reasons discernible only to seers, soothsayers, or shrinks. And then he says, if you haven't seen splitting in action, you will. Narcissists regularly rise to the top of the workplace hierarchies, owning to a unique ability to secure approval and admiration, two forms of recognition that they need to survive in the way the rest of us need oxygen and water. Worse yet, narcissists are able to ascend the upper echelons of organizations without revealing their true colors, until they amass enough power to make it unnecessary to sustain their facade. Once the narcissist can say, "Screw you," with impunity, he will use splitting to cut the legs out from under anyone he previously set up to believe they were cared for. To avoid being played in this manner, this author says to study the following 5 characteristics of narcissists and the strategies for managing them. Failing to grasp what you're dealing with guarantees that a narcissist will make your life a living hell. The next page states that narcissists promise you gold, but deliver pyrite. The author also states if you want a primer on narcissism, check out Oliver Stone's movie Wall Street. He says it illustrates how corporate raider and supreme narcissist Gordon Gekko used every nuance of splitting in the book to grind those close to him into the dirt. Take, for example, how Gekko told Bud Fox, a broker who emulated his every move, "I'm gonna make you rich, Bud Fox." In the end, Fox made a fortune working for Gekko, but was indicted by the SEC for insider trading. The gift that made Gekko appreciate him and ultimately jailed. Never saw that movie, so maybe it's one to check out. But it says, what can you do about narcissists overpromising? Keep your expectations of what they will deliver as low as possible and understand they will give you only what they need to sustain your involvement with them. When you no longer serve a function in their life, they'll dump you, discard. Until that day comes, play their game. Never expect anything from them that you do not pay for, in advance and in excess of fair market value. The next part I find very true is narcissists never like you, care about you, or become your friend. Gordon Gekko also told Bud Fox, if you need a friend, get a dog. The savagery of this remark lies in its killing 2 sacred cows with 1 stone, or 1 blow. Gekko was ostensibly Fox's friend, so the remark gave lie to something Fox valued, and B, Gekko denigrated the concept of friendship, rendering it no more valuable than a canine's bonding reflex. When a narcissist appears to be befriending you, he or she is really engaged in a complex process of creating quid pro quo deals. The types exchangers Don Vito Corleone was famous for. If you know this, wear a Kevlar vest to protect your heart and play your own version of let's make a deal. If a narcissist invites you to his or her beach house, have him or her visit your ski lodge. Then, regardless of which retreat you are at, never delude yourself into believing that the narcissist enjoys your company. He wants you to feel special, so if he needs you, you'll respond like Pavlov's dogs. Salivation. Never criticize a narcissist. Present constructive feedback as mild praise. Years ago, this guy says he worked for a narcissistic who regularly lauded his work. Then everything changed. A week after sending him a box of Cuban cigars, accompanied by a note that read, "Thank you, genius," the client fired him. Why? After he didn't respond to a dozen emails reminding him that he'd not been paid for his work, he called to remind him. When you criticize a narcissist, regardless of how accurate you are, you run the risk of inflicting a narcissistic injury and becoming the target of narcissistic rage. For having the temerity to remind his client, "Hey, you owe me," he was called names he would not print for this article. And if you have an issue with a narcissist, never point a finger of blame at him or her or it. Any accusation will cause him or her to feel shame, and nothing wounds a narcissist more than humiliation. Instead, tell it that you need his or her help to help you understand your world. His or her view won't jibe with yours, but if you repeat the request often enough using measured words in a calm manner, you may elicit an awareness of obligation in a person whose mother told him he was her son and never realized that what she should have called him was son, S-O-N. Never ignore a narcissist. On the street, narcissists are called egomaniacs, not because their egos are blown out of proportion from achievements, but owing to their maniacal obsession with themselves. They're standing vis-a-vis those who've made it, and their compensatory need to inflate what is actually a damaged sense of self. A friend of his once asked, "Tell me what parents do to create narcissists." And the author told this friend it was complicated. But the friend insisted that he provide him with one action that explains how egomaniacs become what they are. Finally, he said, they do it by making little Johnny a showpiece, telling all who will pay attention, "Look at how special my son is." As an adult, Jonathan loathes the memory of being made into an object used to gratify his parents' need for attention, yet depends on the same sort of attention to survive. To work for or with a narcissist, you must be responsive the moment they demand attention. If you cannot respond to the bell, don't sign up for the job. If you do react as desired, what can save you from psychic torment is learning to temper the narcissist's demands without incurring his or her wrath. Responses such as, "Sounds good to me," chill the needy child by affirming his or her worldview while limiting your involvement in actualizing it. Next, the author says to have compassion for the narcissist. And he says it's hard to dredge up sympathy for a narcissist since working with or for one sets you up for inevitable beatdown. You can forestall the outcome if you distance yourself emotionally, as described above, and remind yourself that beneath his flimsy or her flimsy veneer of power is a terrified Wizard of Oz, shaking behind a curtain that shields him or her from being seen for who it is. You can also try to imagine how you would feel suffering a chronic need to hear that the world holds you in high regard, knowing you will crumble like a house of cards if your self-deceptions are not validated. Cocaine addicts have an easier time navigating through a day than narcissists do, since all they need is a chemical fix. Nothing about their addiction forces them to hide a character flaw from those they depend on to love them. And then he states, do not mistake his compassion for narcissists as directing you to befriend them. If you try to and succeed, your victory will be short-lived. Intimacy arouses vulnerability in narcissists by triggering a recollection of how their parents exploited them. Instead, think of narcissists as harboring the deluded belief that living the good life or making windfall profits will cure them. You know these fixes never work, but forgive them their folly to the extent that you can.
I am the narcopath, and tonight is Workplace Confession. You and I worked together once, if not maybe a few times, and I'm here to make some confessions to you, because I know you probably wondered about them. First off, do you remember in the workplace? When, knowing I had 10 years seniority on you, when the company asked us to submit our vacation requests for the next year, do you recall? When I said to you so friendly like, I said, oh, why don't you tell me what days you're asking off for so I can make sure that I don't ask for those same days because I have more seniority?
And like a fool, you gave me all the dates that you wanted for the next year. And do you recall what I did? I asked for every single one of the days you wanted off. So, no hard feelings. Just thought I'd let you know that one.